As the crisis in Catalonia escalates and the Spanish state engages in savage repression of the referendum for self-determination and independence in Catalonia, I raised the attitude of the Irish government and the European Union to what the Spanish state is doing to the people of Catalonia yesterday in the Dáil. And really I got a pathetic non-response from Leo Varadkar. My question to the Minister for Foreign Affairs wasn't even addressed by the Minister himself. He didn't bother to turn up. And really this is indicative of the failure of both the Irish government and all European governments to condemn what the Spanish state is doing in viciously suppressing a democratic movement for self-determination and independence in Catalonia.
Deputy Boyd Barrett.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Taoiseach, I want to know, is the subcommittee going to discuss, and are you going to propose to the subcommittee in advance of the European Council that we issue, as a state, an absolutely unequivocal condemnation of the Spanish state and Mariano Rajoy for the brutal and violent suppression of a democratic exercise in self-determination by the people of Catalonia. The Article 1 of the UN Charter and all international law clearly defines self-determination. The right of people to, quote, freely determine without external interference their political status and to pursue their economic, social and cultural development. That right has been violently suppressed by the Spanish state. And while there has been some mealy-mouthed criticism of violence in general, there has not been a straightforward, and there should be, condemnation by your government and by European leaders of the brutal suppression of a democratic exercise in the right to self-determination. That's what's at stake. We would not accept if the British state said that people in England or Wales had the right to determine whether the Scottish people had independence. And yet, we are standing over, it appears, and your comments seem to stand over, as do other European leaders, the right of the centralised Spanish state to suppress the right of the people of Catalonia to self-determination. It's shocking in its hypocrisy for a European Union that goes on and on and on about its commitment to human rights, and then to stand idly by while the Spanish state uses the most savage means to crush a democratic exercise in self-determination. So I want to know, Taoiseach, are you going to come out clearly and stand up for the right of people to decide, not to take sides on which way they should vote, but just on their right to democratically decide their own political future?
In terms of the events in Catalonia, these were discussed at the Cabinet meeting this morning. It's not intended to discuss it at the Cabinet subcommittee as well, and I answered questions on this earlier in more detail. We haven't proposed a special economic status.
Please let the Taoiseach respond.
We haven't proposed a special economic status.
Condemning the violence is a start, as the Taoiseach has done, but it's not really acceptable for European Union leaders, including our own Taoiseach, to refuse to condemn what is the violent suppression of the exercise of self-determination. And that's what's happening, because it's condemning violence, but not condemning the decision to suppress a democratic vote. In fact, there's a sort of to some extent, a justification talking about it being an internal Spanish matter and within Spanish law. The UN Charter and international law is absolutely crystal clear on self-determination and the right of people to self-determination. And that right is being violently suppressed by a European state, the Spanish state. And Europe is not condemning that fact and saying that the people of Catalonia have a right to vote and make their own decision on their political, social and cultural future.
Ira has 4 minutes.
I've listened very carefully to the contributions of the deputies on the situation in Catalonia, and I appreciate fully that your contributions reflect genuine concern and are also, in the case of Deputy O'Brien, informed by your presence in Catalonia over the weekend and indeed along with other Irish elected representatives. And the region is also a location that I visit myself a couple of times each year. And I know that today's debate will be shared with Catalan and indeed other Spanish contacts, and in this way a range of Irish opinions will be shared, and that's something that I welcome. And as Minister McEntee said when she spoke recently on this topic, what happens in Spain is of great interest to their Irish friends in this House and indeed in the communities that we represent across this country. Upholding the Constitution and the rule of law in all of its aspects is a key underpinning of all modern democracies, and Ireland respects the constitutional and territorial unity of Spain. The Government's position remains that the constitutional and political arrangements in Spain, as in any country of the European Union, are matters to be determined by their own citizens through their own institutions in keeping with that rule of law. Political developments in democracies take place within a legal framework. That's what protects the rights of all of our citizens. And respecting the rule of law and the limits that it imposes is not a choice but indeed an obligation. Differences of opinion should be contested robustly by public representatives and indeed others, and all parties should do with full respect for the law and for the rights of citizens. That's the foundation that underpins and protects modern democratic societies. And I shared the dismay felt by many Irish people at the disturbing clashes and injuries sustained last Sunday in Catalonia. And we know from our own experiences here in this island, as well as from experiences elsewhere, of the particular responsibility borne by the authorities to balance law and order whilst respecting rights. Let me be clear, violence has no place in politics. That's always been the position of this government, and I would echo the call from the European Commission to all relevant players to now move very swiftly from confrontation to dialogue. It's important that steps are taken to reduce tensions and to reclaim the space where differing political views can be contested through national and regional democratic institutions with full respect always for the law and for the rights of citizens. The events of last Sunday are the subject of extensive debate in Catalonia and across Spain. Everybody has a responsibility now to reduce tensions, and what we are saying today here in this particular chamber reflects many of the reflections that national and regional representatives there, as well as broader society, are putting forward there. So we trust our Spanish friends to decide for themselves how to shape their own future, and as I have said earlier, what happens in Spain matters very much to us. We encourage all of the parties involved to find ways now to de-escalate tensions and to build trust.
I'm also concerned by the response, Minister. You said, I quote, "We trust our Spanish friends to decide for themselves how to shape their future." You see, that's the problem. I don't trust Mariano Rajoy or the Spanish state that has both personally and politically a brutal history of suppressing the desire for self-determination for the people of Catalonia. So we don't and shouldn't trust them, and what we saw on Saturday was a shocking, violent suppression of people who were acting peacefully and trying to do so in a democratic way. The Catalonian Parliament made a decision democratically to hold a referendum, and people went out to try and cast ballot papers, and the Spanish state violently suppressed them. Now, Europe is always going on about its commitment to human rights. This is an elementary human, democratic and under international law right for people to exercise the freedom to self-determine. And the Spanish state is denying it. And the question is, what is our government going to say about that? And what is the European Union going to do to say about that? And if it says nothing, then its claim to be concerned for democracy or human rights is in tatters. And frankly, it's covered itself in shame in the last few days in failing to speak out more robustly about what the Spanish state is doing.
You have 2 minutes.
In the short time remaining, I want to first again express my appreciation for the contributions from all members of the House this afternoon and their concerns regarding the situation in Catalonia. I want to reassure you once again that what is happening in Spain is also of great interest to the Government, Ireland enjoys excellent relationship with Spain and a great rapport with its people, from the thousands of Spanish school children who visit Ireland every year to the Irish and Spanish tourists and business people and our contacts at political and governmental level. With regard to the latter, we are working and will continue to work constructively with the Spanish Government to build bilateral and trade relations and to pursue our common goals at EU and international level. And in order to better understand our EU partner, we are closely monitoring developments in the country and with particular attention to any potential impact they might have on Irish citizens. My department is following closely those developments and is responding to the concerns of Irish citizens. And early this afternoon, and many of you made special mention of it, the Taoiseach spoke about Sunday's developments in Catalonia, and you're very much aware of what he said. We were all horrified by the violent incidents that we saw, which involved state actors and unarmed, unthreatening civilians. We feel, not least from our own experiences, that such actions are counterproductive, and again from our own experiences, political progress needs to be made through dialogue. The Government supports a resolution to the current situation, which is based upon democracy and the rule of law. And I want to again reiterate the Government's position that this must be determined by Spain and its own people, based on the rule of law and through their own institutions. It is through such democratic processes that all voices can be heard and a way forward can be found. None of us here today want to see further violence or injuries such as those seen last Sunday, and I welcome the fact that demonstrations that have taken place since then have been allowed to take place in a peaceful manner.